Absolutely.
I hate that thing. Like sort of, it's like, oh no, this is like we're on now, so like we have to click that button. So I have to be professional. Just be yourself. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. I'm excited to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Tricia Conyers. Tricia, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Leanne. It's great
Awesome.
to
Yeah, we've sort of connected over the last few months, and I know a bit about your story and the work that you do. I was wondering if you could share like the highlights of that, how you discovered this work with our listeners.
Sure. So I would say, I guess in a way, my journey into facilitation has been, I'm not sure if it's traditional or if it's, kind of different. I guess I didn't start off obviously as a facilitator, but I started off in change management work and helping people to, implement change, right? And in doing that, the ideas and the processes and all the changes that they're implementing are not ours. So it's about being emergent with them and helping them to create the answers for themselves. So I guess that in its own way is the form of facilitation, right? Or, it's kind of facilitating that out of people. So I guess that is, kind of in my core, I did kind of 20 years in a change management consulting firm, and I had a lot of practical experience kind of doing that, and that was very much at the heart of how we worked. But if I think back as well, I think there've been some moments where it was kind of like, oh, that's really interesting, like I want to do more of that, and there are times I think I was lucky, in my university sort of time, to have lecturers that weren't lecturers, but lecturers who facilitated conversations, and it was just such a different kind of experience being in the room with someone that was facilitating that conversation versus someone that was just teaching, so it was kind of like, there's something kind of like, oh, this is interesting, right? And then I early on in my career, I joined a consulting company, and I had an epic fail moment in
a tell us about the fail.
In a facilitation sort of experience. My boss at the time was like, we're doing this 3-day workshop on supply chain, and you're going to be the supply chain expert. And I was absolutely not the supply chain expert. And it's just, I would just remember at some point in time, standing there in front of the room and looking at all of these people looking at me and just thinking, I'm not the expert on this. I do not know what I'm doing. And it was just, a moment of it was horrible. It was just, it was terrible. And I just kind of remember thinking, it doesn't have to be like that. It definitely doesn't have to be like that. And while in facilitation, you don't have to know everything, but it wasn't a facilitation moment. I was positioned as something different, and so it didn't give me the freedom to facilitate a conversation. It was like I was there in a different capacity. So I'd say that was an epic fail moment. But then I can think about, a kind of success moment as well, where I was at a time asked to sort of step into that role of facilitation with an organization. And part of what they used to use so many slides and sort of just work in that way. And I just had this in my mind. I was like, we are going to do this with no slides. I'm going to create an experience for people in the room, and it's going to be visual around the room, hand-drawn, I'm going to create an experience where people lean in and solve these problems for themselves. And I just took that approach with it, and it was just transformational. They were just amazed, and it was the best thing that ever happened.
Let's talk through, I've got so many questions based on what you've just been sharing very quickly. Unfortunately, in my university career, I was lectured at, and so my engagement was pretty low. But you got to share you went to a pretty good university, right? Pretty famous one.
Yes, a pretty famous one. I went to Cambridge University, yes. And this was part of a course that was a very small course that we did. So it was only about 26 of us, maybe, in the course. And I think part of it is a lot of our lecturers were actually business people, business. So they joined the university to come in and sort of teach modules. So they weren't really lecturers or teachers. So they took a different approach, and part of it was probably that.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. I think, and I see that a lot more in the university sector as well. Let's talk about that moment where you decided no slides. So you didn't just go, right, we've got 100 slides here, we're going to reduce to 50. I'm going to sort of compromise this. You went completely the other way. What was the reaction from your peers when you decided to go that way?
Well, so there were sort of two moments when that happened. One was more of a like a workshop kind of experience. And I was given permission, right, to kind of, we wanted to shake things up. You know, we have been having these sort of traditional meetings all the time. The organization was going through some dramatic changes, and they knew that they needed to kind of shake things up and shake up everyone's thinking. So I'd actually tried even to get like a graphic recorder in and a couple of different things, but that didn't quite fly. But I was like, I will figure out a way to do this in a visual, graphical way that engages everybody, right? You know, that is different. And the impact was just, it was totally different. You know, that experience when you sit in a boardroom and people are there and they just lean out in the chair and they fold their arms, and PowerPoint, it's like, oh, well, we've come to this corporate version of going to the movie theater, right? Because we just lean out and we're just going to look at this stuff and take it in, right? But, you know, when you change that dynamic and everybody has a pen in their hand and everybody has stuff in front of them, whether that's, you know, I love to use physical and tactile tools, be that Lego or pictures or images or objects, whatever they be, right? To get people physically leaning in, right? That they have to lean in and they have to tell stories about whatever it is that they are shaping or creating, and they have to be present. They have to show up, right?
Yeah. So the reason I'm sort of, you talk about physical things. The other day I was running this activity. It's like a space themed conference. I just thought, they got this like helium rocket, if you're listening in the background. And I've just shared that just on the flip chart before. It honestly brought me more joy just having something different physically in the room. And even my own energy was a little bit different from that. And it's, yeah, you talk about the boardroom and people want to go there for blue sky thinking. They put them in the same environment. It's like, whatever the objective and goal is, position the workshop, design it in a way that can create that. Let's talk about your use of physical activities, and knowing that we are virtual now, like, have you managed to think of ways to bring in the physicality to some of the sessions that you're running remotely?
You know, so it's such a great question, right? Because I've really tried to challenge myself, because I love digital work, right? And I love this kind of sort of virtual space. I've really tried to challenge myself about what are we really losing and what can we not recreate, right? And can we get more thoughtful about how we do that, right? So, you know, when we're in person, you know, what is it? Okay, so we miss the opportunity to sort of touch the same things that are in front of us, or something that are on a table. But again, even in this virtual, if I'm really well planned, can I not send packages of things to people and tell them to open it at different times and everyone have the same, you know, sort of props and tools? Or let people even get more creative because they have different things all around them that I wouldn't have in the room, right? But, you know, if they have to use what's kind of available to them in their space to build or to create or to prototype, does it have to be the same thing, right? Do we all have to have the same thing? You know, the intent is to, for me, it's to unlock the story, right? It's to unlock the story and to help them tell, you know, talk about the challenge or talk about the possibility or talk about the opportunity in a different way. And the physical things, or, you know, the pictures, the images, the objects, the whatever, are just a way of helping to bring that story to life, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess I keep challenging myself, like, what are we really losing, right? And can we not recreate it if we're thoughtful and creative and just challenge ourselves a little bit?
I love that question. What are we actually losing here, as opposed to, oh, I ran it this way, I've got to do it this way, I'm just going to put a webcam on it and translate it. It's totally reimagining what that would look like. As well,
you reframe that question as kind of, when we say what are we losing, but what can we gain, right?
Love it.
Kind of just, it's turning that around as what can we gain, right? Because like you're saying, we can gain the fact that we might get something totally new by just asking people to go away for 30 minutes and build something, right, out of anything that you can find, and then, you know, to answer this question and see what they come out. We might gain something totally new that's actually never happened in the room, because in the room we're constrained to what we bring in the room, right, as opposed to what we have all around us, right, or what's available. And everyone has sort of something different. So I guess I keep kind of just challenging myself, like, what are we losing, right? What are we losing? And we do lose some of the serendipity of the lunchtime conversation and the coffee conversation and that kind of stuff. And again, even that, I think about, like, oh, how can you recreate that, right? How can you recreate that? You can stay on video, you can drop people in rooms to have lunch, you can, you know, go and grab your lunch and eat together, you know, in a virtual space. You can, turn your camera off if you want a little time, or keep your camera on and grab a cup of coffee and sit and chat. I guess I just keep thinking, like, how can we recreate it rather than think that it's gone,
Yes. And that we're limited, right? Yeah. Often, even when I'm doing stuff like this, I have to challenge myself by using my own facilitation techniques, like reversing the assumptions that I have in my head, writing them down, going, what would the opposite look like? So I think we're so well placed as facilitators. We got like the coolest tools that we use for our groups, and sometimes like, let's just use it on ourselves to mix this up.
Yeah.
So you're based in a pretty exotic part of the world, and I'm sure that you're loving the remote style of work. So I'd love you to share with the listeners, like, how are you supporting companies from where you are placed on an amazing island?
Yeah. So, the thing is, so I live and work from Trinidad, and I have worked with an organization. I partnered with an organization for many years while I was living in Trinidad, but I guess entry to that organization was because they had an office here, right? But obviously, I think we benefit a lot in Trinidad from this major shift that's happened in the world in the last year, because it has opened up virtual work in the sense that you could be anywhere, right? And you don't have to partner with somebody who is in your country, or even in your time zone anymore. You can partner with anybody from anywhere, right? I have worked with companies in Africa. I've worked with people in all over the US and all over the world, right? If they're open, if there's a relationship and they're open to working with me, I can work with them, right? So that's great for me personally as well. In the last year, like when the pandemic happened, or more than a year now, I just remember thinking, this is such a cool opportunity for me, because everybody was taking all their training online, and all these amazing things that I wanted to go and do, and where I would have to travel now for like 2 days to get to wherever, right? To leave Trinidad, to go to, Denmark, to go and do a course, was now online, and all I had to do was sign in, right? So it was just great. I mean, I think that for me has just been fantastic, personally, a personal benefit that I've seen, because I don't have to travel all over to be able to participate in those things, webinars, workshops, training, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, I love it. It's totally just brought down, like there's no real international borders now. It's like, if you want to connect with someone or do something, I love that you said that there's actually unlimited potential here and possibility. I don't even think we've even started to explore that. We've sort of been disrupted, we've dealt with it, but it's like, let's now emerge from this and just see what, I might just move to an island now as well, but it needs good Wi-Fi.
Good Wi-Fi. Yes, I agree.
yeah, definitely. Can you now, what are you noticing in this virtual meeting space, and how are you sort of helping companies with improving their sessions? Because like I said, we've as facilitators had to transition our work, and everyone else is also having their meetings and putting them online. Now, we also knew that, and I shouldn't make broad generalizations here, but I will because I've been in corporate life. The majority of meetings that were held, I don't think were very beneficial. There's no output. It went for an hour because that was the time allocated, decisions being made in the last sort of few minutes. What are you noticing? How are you helping companies with their meetings online? And what are you noticing?
I think, well, for a start, I mean, I'm noticing now this, obviously, this shift to hybrid, and having lived in an island, I've experienced that for some time, right? Because a lot of the times, like, it would be, well, we'll get everybody together, but because I was so far away and it would be so much travel, I'll just dial in. Tricia would just dial in, so that kind of, so I've been the one-off in that hybrid situation. And this is just my personal feeling, but hybrid really kind of definitely is not my favorite mode. I don't personally have not experienced it work well, and I'm more of the mindset of the kind of one virtual, all virtual, right? I think that really, if equity is part of what you're going for in your meeting, an environment of equity, a space of equity where people feel equal, you're already creating a dynamic and an environment that is not about equality when you have this hybrid situation, right? And if we can all be on and have the same physical space, right? We have the same airspace in terms of the square that we have on the screen, right? We're already kind of changing the dynamic when it comes to equality, right, in meetings. So I'm not really a favor of the hybrid
Mm.
I personally haven't experienced it work well yet. Maybe others have, and there's lots for me to learn about that. I'm very open to that. But like when I do sessions, I do a monthly learning session with the group. I always encourage, and some of them are together, and some are in very different locations. Even the ones that are together, I'll encourage, please dial in from your own device. Right, everyone, because it also means in terms of participation, if we're using certain tools, everybody has their own keyboard, right? And everybody can take part equally, right? So I think it has a big impact on equality in meetings, right? And that changes the environment. So I mean, that's one thing for me. You were just talking about the point about sort of meetings, and so many of them are terrible. I feel like I still see that,
Yeah.
I think part of it for me is I think people think of having a facilitator for a workshop because it's like an event. I'm getting my people together to think deeply about a topic, or for a team experience or something like that. They don't often think about having a facilitator for their more typical, regular transactional sort of meetings, right? And I think people think that defining an agenda sometimes is enough. But there's so much more to that, right? And when you think of how much time in companies we spend in meetings, those are the points where we get together as people and have conversations, and they really shape the culture of the organization. They shape what's taking shape, right? That's where people have the interactions that they then go away and talk about, right? Those sort of moments that they talk about in culture that they refer to, they happen in those kinds of sessions a lot of time, right? But yet we leave all those meetings up to chance, right? We leave them up to chance in terms of, is the agenda kind of enough, as opposed to thinking about, if I had a facilitator as part of this meeting, the facilitator might think about, well, okay, yes, this process and what do we want to get out of this meeting and who's there. But you extend that thinking, to the experience that we want people to have and the environment that we want to create in the meeting, right? How I want people to engage in the meeting and the expectations that I want to set. So there's some other things that I think as a facilitator we think about that's more than just product or purpose or process, that's more experiential, right? And I think if you bring that into your meetings, if your day-to-day meetings could result in better decisions, right? More impactful decisions that have a better impact on your business, isn't that better for your bottom line in the end, right? But yet we don't think about meetings as the place to have somebody in that role. We think about it as something kind of like, that's discrete, or, an event or something like that.
I'm so fascinated, but you're sort of the first person that's articulated that way. And I'm like, it totally makes sense in that we go to a facilitator, it's an external event, it's going to be, we're putting all this effort into it, so we got to make it amazing. It's like, well, why not have that philosophy with every day? As you said, the amount of time that is being sucked up. And also one thing I used to say that now I'm sort of relating back to what you've just said is the culture is created through the meetings. I remember traveling to various mine sites, and I'd sit in the pre-start, which is like the first talk at 6 a.m. They bring everyone together and the supervisor gets in front and talks. And I could tell the culture of a site just from that pre-start, like who was showing up on time, where were they standing, was anyone getting engaged? And you could just tell. It's so true. I love it.
Yeah. So I think that's a big one for me, is that, like we just don't give those day-to-day, sort of interventions the same weight as somehow we give these sort of like moments that we create when we, let's say, we need a workshop on this. So we, or that kind of strategic planning, we're getting together to do strategic planning, or we're getting together to do a kickoff or something, right? They create these sort of moments that require it, but not the day-to-day sort of, rhythm of some of those meetings.
This is really, like, I'm just really kind of sitting in that, just in terms of even like, so we talk about marketing a lot, like just how you, because the problem, I think the challenge sometimes is with marketing that facilitation skill to leaders, because I think, as you have said, it's like a separate thing. It's like, that's a role of a person, but I need to own that. And I think there's a lot of sort of trending content now that great leaders are great facilitators. It's like the secret super weapon, right? Of any great leader is they're using facilitation skills as they go, like through the day-to-day. Have you worked with leaders in helping them sort of build up that skill set? And what do you find, like what helps them sort of just get in touch with their inner facilitator?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think the best leaders definitely have that kind of style. They ask the questions and they definitely engage in that way, seeking to kind of draw the answers out of the group. I still wonder though, as good as you can be a leader with that type of skills, if there's still not the benefit of having somebody in the role, right, separate from being the leader. I know we talk all the time as facilitators about the difficulty it is to have a perspective about a certain sort of area or content or something and still be neutral enough to draw out from the group, right? So that's a major sort of struggle, right, with being in that sort of role as the leader of the meeting as well as the facilitator of the meeting. But I think the other side of that is also the difficulty in recognizing your own limiting assumptions or the limiting assumptions of the group, because you're so inside of that space that you can't see it for yourself, right? How often do you see your own limiting assumptions, right? Most often for me is when my husband says to me, well, why don't you think about it like this? I'm like, oh yes, why don't I think about it like that? Right? Because it's suddenly been reframed and mirrored back at me. It's something else, right? But how much do I do that for myself, right? So as a leader, even though I could have that facilitative sort of style, can I really in the moment be able to recognize my own limiting assumptions that maybe I'm bringing into the group or that of the group that's holding us back from doing something? So I still, I think it's great that, most, and I definitely see it as a leadership skill for the 21st century, sort of being able to work in that way. I just still wonder if there's benefit to having someone in the role of it, that is really sitting in that role and can be outside of everything else.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of times when I was a leader running meetings and I was absolutely, I mean, it wasn't an unconscious bias. It was a totally conscious bias. Like even the questions I was asking my team were like leading questions because I wanted a certain result. It's like, and it's such a different experience when you're the external, I don't actually, there's no real consequence of me being on either side. I'm here to get these ideas out in that non-objective way.
Yeah.
In that objective way. Yeah. So in terms of your personal preparation for these workshops, in terms of design, like, a month before, or even like the day before, like in terms of your energy, how do you work these? How do you sort of build up for these events?
So I think there's lots to be said about sort of preparation. I don't think that I could say anything that necessarily most of the people on your podcast probably haven't said 100 times in terms of like what you do a month before or a day before. I guess for me, I think about approaching it with sort of curiosity and creativity, right? Kind of at the heart in terms of preparation. I'm not so much going to say about like a month before, a week before, but kind of that mindset of curiosity and creativity. Curiosity in terms of all sorts of questions about what's going to work or what's not worked, or why are we doing this, or what have you tried, and all of those kinds of questions to sort of understand who's there, why those people, why not other people, all those kind of questions, and creativity about just because there's no one answer in a facilitation sort of experience, right? So there's a million different routes to the end objectives or the process or the product at the end or whatever. So kind of how can I get sort of creative, or what's creative or sort of different to that? And then I guess I'd like to think about as well, there's the content and the context of the things that you're going to talk about in the room, so there's always that stuff and understanding, but there's also kind of, some questions around what are the connections that I want people to make? How do I want people to connect either with the content or even the context or even each other? So there's sort of connections is a big sort of curiosity about connections, and how do I create the right conditions for that to happen, right? So there's thoughts, I think, around that. And then also around kind of through the whole experience, what is the capabilities that I want to kind of stretch or grow, kind of put people into a sort of a place to sort of play with, right? Outside outside their comfort zone, so that they emerge with a different kind of level of confidence, right? So they come out with something kind of different at the end, so that it's not just the, you know, preparation around kind of just to get to the product or the objective, but it's kind of the people that are going to be in the room, what's that sort of that thread or that experience that they're going to have around their own capabilities, their own confidence, the connections, all that kind of stuff, that's going to make the whole thing an experience for them. I guess for me, I always kind of really think about it as an experience rather than, you know, just a workshop or a meeting. It's you know, kind of when you think about some of the best experiences that you have, I tried to do some thinking about this the other day in terms of like what's in the DNA of an experience, right? Like what are some of the best experiences that you had? Or it was when I went to this concert, or I was on this vacation, I was on, you know, what was inside of that? You know, what were the things that made that like really powerful for you? You know, were there aha moments or surprise moments or anchoring things or inspiration or reflections? You know, what was it that was inside that made that experience so powerful? And I kind of feel like if I can tap into kind of what's in the DNA of an experience, and you can bring that into meetings and workshops and all that kind of stuff, wouldn't it just make it so much more powerful and so much more, you know, exciting for everybody? They want to come back.
Yeah, well, I can absolutely sense your passion and energy around this. And I don't know if that was intentional, your 6 C's. I wrote them down: curiosity, creativity, connection, conditions, capability, and confidence. Is that a model that you've got, or have I?
It's inspired by, I mean, I have to give some of the credit, some work that I did with the Chaos Pilots. They talk about 7 C's in terms of some there, but then it's kind of just my own bills and in some other ways, and kind of making that mine. It's taking shape as a model. It hasn't quite landed on a piece of paper yet.
I love it. And they also, it's a question I sometimes ask myself is, you get a really high strike rate and attendance rate at weddings. So what are weddings doing? You know, like, and I think, oh, it's the invitation, it's the amount of time that they're given, it's the destination, like all of this stuff, the theming, like it's all built in. Right. And so I sometimes just go there, but I love it. I think of like maybe a music festival, like what are they actually doing? Like what are the tickets, like the tickets themselves look great. I went to this Elton John concert. It was like a holographic ticket. Looks super cool. Of course, Elton John.
I've been trying to kind of deconstruct that, you know, kind of what's in the DNA of those experiences that when you think back and like, oh God, that was so fantastic, right? You know, like that was amazing. What was inside that? You know, can we pluck it apart so that we can recreate it?
Yeah,
you know,
it's like the recipe. And I agree. We're in the space of actually experience design, not workshop design. It's experience. And I think my difference as a first-time facilitator back, 10 years ago I was all about the content and the objective, like the rational side of things. And then once I learned about experiential objectives, it completely shifted like my mindset around delivering that. So you've called out so many important considerations. Do you have a favorite icebreaker activity that you like to run? It's like your go-to. I'm just curious.
So for me, it's always in that kind of visual, tactile kind of space, right? I love using images, and whether there's a sort of like the Cablo has this great set of sort of icons, of people and icons and on cards, right? That you can, and there are a bunch of them, right? Creative Center for Creative Leadership sells whole packs of images and that kind of stuff as well. But those sort of images that really help people sort of tell stories, and you can use them to start sessions off and tell appreciative stories about what's powerful and what really works, so getting people in that mindset of kind of just stepping out of being too tactical focused about kind of, exactly your word, my expectations for today are this, and that kind of, and kind of just, let's just enter into a world of kind of possibility here. Let's tell a story. Let's talk about what really worked, in this same space. I like my icebreakers and all the things I do to connect back to why we're there. I don't really love kind of just doing them for the sake of doing them, right? I like them to kind of connect back, but everything has its place, I guess. But so I like that. And so using in the virtual world, when we were talking about that, like, you lose some of that ability, but then even so, like, again, I think about you get onto a Padlet and people can bring an image. You can Google search an image, right? So instead of me giving you some to select from, you can find your own, right? You kind of bring an image from something. So it's not gone, it's just different, right? But I like doing stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of just my preference.
Yeah, definitely. And even something as simple as like when I was doing in-person workshops was I'd just go, yeah, just pick some royalty-free images, get them printed on photo cards and just bring them in. And it's such a handy thing. Like you said, cards, all those visuals are super handy just to have with you because people draw connections, as you said, the connection like to that image, but their interpretation of it might be completely different to how someone else sees that as well.
And what's really cool too is you can keep them in a place throughout, right? So whether that's virtually or in the room, and then as the day goes by, if you use it for different sort of prompt questions, you can create a collage from the event or from the session, right? That has all these different images that came through the different prompt questions that you asked. And then you can find some of the sort of, maybe threads that are in that, right? So you can use that to kind of extract, even deeper meaning in terms of why we're kind of here. I guess I'll add as well, I mean, maybe my passion for kind of using that is because of my heart. I think if I ever had a different career, I might have been a photographer. And I'm an amateur photographer. And I'm very proud of the $14 that I have made selling photographs. But that's the cap of my...
Well, you got to plug, where are you selling them, Tricia? You got to plug your...
Oh, on 2020, it's a website that you can kind of upload your stuff and people can buy images for like $1. I mean, I don't think I haven't sold 14, but I have made a whopping $14 from selling photographs.
We all have to start. We all start from zero. That is amazing. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Send it through, please. I'd love to see your images, and hopefully there's some nice images of the island as well. So any advice for first-time facilitators, people that are getting into this career? I mean, you said you've done it for some time now. What would you say to them?
So I think, there's so much that you could say as well. I think if I think back to even my own sort of starting, what I wish someone had told me. I mean, so I guess two things. I guess always be learning is kind of something that I kind of think about. I enjoy getting into that and learning different methodologies and seeing how people do things and all that kind of stuff, so it gives me inspiration as well, right? So it's not so much kind of like, oh, I'm going to recreate that, but it gives me inspiration for my own ideas, so kind of staying and getting involved in things like that, where you get a chance to kind of keep learning in that space. But I also really wish someone had told me to sort of intentionally practice and strengthen and deepen my listening skills. Because I think listening as a facilitator, really listening beyond the words to what's happening in the room, what's not said, to being able to listen deeply to what's happening in the group, I think is something that it takes a lot of practice. And I don't think I'm an expert in any way. I think I continue to sort of practice that in every way, but it's the thing for me that I think, and you can practice listening skills, right? Like I came across not too long ago, Oscar Trimboli's website, and he's amazing, right? He gives you, these exercises to practice listening and all these different ways of rethinking your listening. And that to me has been fantastic as well, just in terms of really thinking about how you practice listening, right? So I think that's one of the things that for me, I wish I had started that earlier.
Well, And if you're listening, well, now's the time to start. And it's great that you mentioned Oscar. He was a guest on this podcast quite in the early days, and we're friends now. But I remember when I was interviewing him on the show, like when you're interviewing a listening expert, and you're like, I've really got to listen. I'm like, there's extra pressure on me to listen to this. I mean, not that I do listen, but I think, as you said, it's like that deeper level of like going past the words, like what's the intent, the meaning behind it. It's very powerful. Tricia, we've got listeners that would love to connect with you, like look at your amazing visuals. Where should we send them?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. is Tricia Conyers, and Island Inspirations. And on Instagram is Island Inspirations, which is the name of my company. Website's coming soon, so it's not quite there yet, but coming soon at islandinspirations.co. But that is where you would find me. So Tricia Conyers on LinkedIn or Island Inspirations on Instagram. And Instagram, you can see some of my very amateur graphic recording and graphic facilitation that I bring into my sessions as well.
It's absolutely not amateur, I think. Yeah, go see it for yourselves. We'll put a link to all of that in the show notes. Please reach out, connect to Tricia, and share something that you've learned as a result of this conversation. Tricia, awesome to reconnect with you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise and talking about workshops as an experience. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Leanne.
Yay, well done.
Thank you so much.